Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started with the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund Technical Assistance webinar. It is 10 a.m. I'm going to leave the link open for this, so some folks that are straggling in will still be able to get in whenever they are able to. The topics we're going to go over today is the overview of the purpose of the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund grant program, its goals. We're going to talk about the eGift module within the provider portal and the RSAF application. We will be talking about RSAF evaluation criteria, the review process, and then at the end I will open it up to you all to submit questions to myself. We've got Tracy Mason, who is our IT staff here in Linwood Pooling. So any questions you have about the process, application, evaluation, or administration of RSAF, now is the perfect time to ask those questions. You can do so by going down into the chat box at the very bottom of your screen and questions, and I will be reading those as we go through, and we will wait till the end to reply to them so that everybody can get their questions in. Without further ado, so the purpose of RSAF, as written in the Code of Virginia, is to financially assist eligible emergency medical services agencies to purchase EMS equipment and vehicles and provide needed EMS programs and projects pursuant to those sections of the Code of Virginia. The deadline for this cycle will be September 16th, 2019 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because we are in Virginia. So to provide an overview of the funding for this program, we have approximately $9 million annually. So if you look at the last cycle and the cycle before that, it kind of tells you about how much is available per cycle. And when you look at the number of applicants we have per cycle, it will tell you exactly how competitive that particular cycle is. There is a match requirement for this program because it is a matching grant reimbursement program. A regular match would be at 50-50, meaning that the state pays 50% of the equipment cost or project cost associated with your grant, and the agency or entity applying pays the other 50%. Hardship grants are awarded to agencies who have documented and proven significant financial need or financial hardship. And in those cases, the state pays 80% of the costs and the applicant pays 20% of the costs. We have 2 grant cycles annually. The deadlines are March 15th and September 15th, and the awards are July 1 and January 1. So grants that are awarded on July 1 will run the fiscal year July 1 to June 30, and grants that are awarded January 1st will run a grant period of the calendar year January 1st to December 31st. In the event that a deadline falls on a Saturday, such as this cycle, Sunday, or state federal holiday, the application must be received by 5 p.m. the next business day. So the funding areas for RSAF are: 1, the establishment of the new EMS agency program or service where needed to improve EMS offered in an area. 2, the expansion or improvement of an existing EMS agency program or service. 3, the replacement of equipment or procurement of new equipment. Or 4, the establishment, expansion, or improvement of the EMS training programs. So if you look at these and highlight the key words out of these funding areas, you see the recurrence of the word enhancement, expansion, establishment, improvement, These things really need to bleed through in your application because they tie directly to the evaluation criteria, which we will talk about later in this webinar. Special priorities for funding, which you must explicitly note in your application, and there will be an area that you can check a box that indicates that you are applying for a special priority, are emergency medical dispatch, emergency operations, innovative or special projects. We will get to that later. If you guys have questions about that, you can ask in the chat bar. Multi-jurisdictional or agency projects, and then recruitment and retention projects. To be able to apply for the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund Grant Program, an agency must be a Virginia nonprofit agency or volunteer or governmental organization involved in EMS pursuant to Section 32(1) of the Code of Virginia. So the annual application cycle is drawn out here. It may be a little bit small, so you may have to maximize your screen to be able to see it most clearly. But as I mentioned earlier, the fall cycle will open around August 1st every year. Then we provide a technical assistance webinar, which is what we're doing right now. The fall deadline will close around September 15th. And if that's on a holiday or a weekend, it'll be the next business day. The fall cycle awards are announced and the grant period begins on January 1st. And then there's something new that we're doing as well. We are going to start hosting a Rescue Squad Assistance Fund awardee webinar. And that's going to be for agencies that were awarded to kind of guide you through the process of preparing invoices, submitting and doing all the closeout activities, preparing for the verifications. That way, you know, it reduces the administrative burden on you and really clarifies some of the questions a lot of agencies have been having. After that webinar, the spring cycle opens February 1st. We have another technical assistance webinar. The deadline for the spring cycle closes March 15th. The second cycle or the spring cycle awards are announced on July 1st. And then after that, there should be another circle here that we provide another awardee webinar in the summer. So the technical requirements of the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund grant application is that an applicant can only submit one application per cycle. However, you can request more than one item or unit of equipment per application. We asked that no line items of less than $500. They will be automatically disqualified. And really, for items such as this, you have to kind of put yourself in the mindset of a reviewer who is reviewing requests for very large pieces of equipment that a lot of small nonprofit volunteer agencies would not be able to afford if it weren't for this program. So when you're asking for small line item expenses, you really have to you know, imagine that viewer is not going to look upon that as favorably as something that it would really be of more assistance to another agency. And then requested communications equipment must be P25 compatible. All requests shall comply with the applicable state applicable plans, policies, procedures, and guidelines by the State EMS Advisory Board. Applications must be submitted through the EMS Grant Information Funding Tool, otherwise known as eGift. There's really no other way to apply for a Rescue Squad Assistance Fund grant. So use eGift. Link will be available on our website for that and in the notice sent out. And then you must be registered in EVA as a vendor and fill out the EVA supplemental W-9. The attachments that you will need to include with your application, and you should be getting ready right now as you're preparing to write this, is verification of your federal identification number, your FIN, submit a copy of the most recent federal tax return from the Internal Revenue Service. You only have to do the first page of that. It's known as the Form 990. You must also submit a quote with each item requested. All multi-jurisdictional and agency applicants, basically applicants that are applying with more than one agency, must have a signed letter of agreement from all parties participating in the grant project. A quick note here about submitting quotes. You're going to want to make sure that for certain equipment, you're pulling apart large expenses and submitting you can submit one quote for your entire project, but inside of the eGift application, you're going to want to list each item on that quote as something separate if they're large items. Quick list of unallowable items: leased equipment or vehicles, equipment or vehicles secured by lien or loan, guarantees or warranties, fire suppression apparatus or law enforcement equipment, capital improvements, office management expenses, articles of clothing that are not personal protective clothing, training courses for EMS provider certification, building utilities, otherwise known as indirect costs, or state or federal sales tax. Your request size, you are encouraged to use the current consolidated grant product list 2019 version. It is located under downloads on the RSAF webpage. You should use this list when working out the quote with your vendor to identify what the maximum award size you will receive is, and to try to not exceed that list. Awards will not exceed the maximum dollar amount on this list, and you should not combine multiple pieces of equipment into one. It says quote here, but you should not combine multiple pieces of equipment into one request line on your application. For example, a power load in an ambulance or a power load in a cot. Sometimes vendors will group these things together, and it's okay to have that in one quote, but list those as separate pieces of equipment in your application, and then you can upload that same quote into each of those request lines. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Mason to go over the eGift application and talk about some of the other technical requirements of RSAF.
As Luke stated, the eGift application is the only way to submit grants. It's a web-based application. So it can be accessed from any browser except for Firefox. We do not allow Firefox any longer. There are two types of entities that can request a grant. You either are a licensed EMS agency, which means you can provide care in the Virginia, or you're a non-licensed EMS agency, which means you are not authorized to provide care. So examples of those would be like the regional council, a community college, a sheriff's office, those sorts of entities. There are three types of users. The authorized agent is the person responsible for preparing the grant and any type of grant management after the grant is awarded. The financial officer is the person responsible for verifying the financial information that is on the application, and they have to sign off through electronic signature that that information is accurate. And then your OMD, who also has to sign off by electronic signature before you submit your grant. The OMD signature is only required for agencies, for licensed EMS agencies. So that's not a requirement for non-licensed agencies, but if you have an OMD that you want to have sign off on it, you can, but it's not a requirement. In April, we put a new security release for all of our applications through the portal and eGift and every application that you access through EMS. And we had to be compliant with the state regulations for security. So here's a screen of when you initially log in. A lot of you, when you log in the first time, your account may be locked. So you may have to call the office to get it unlocked. But the first thing you're going to have to do when you log in is set up your security questions. And this is a screen, a sample screen. So you just select the question, provide your answer for all four answers, and then set your password. We now have, I think we've always had a feature for forgot password, but it has changed a little bit. So you can see on this screen where the forgot password is, and if you're a new user. So I failed to mention before, if you're a licensed EMS agency, your agency super user will grant you any role and set up any account that you may need. Your agency super users handles all of that for you, and you don't have to do anything with this new user sign up. If you're a non-licensed agency, then that's where this new user sign up comes into play. So first of all, we're going to go over how to reset your password if you forgot it. The first thing that you're going to do, you're going to click on forgot password. You're going to have to enter in your user ID, which is either your certification number or your email address or whatever that is, whatever your user ID is. We are also using the CAPTCHA functionality, which is utilized in a lot of sites. So you should be familiar with it probably through your bank or wherever, where you have to select, in this instance, it's select all the pictures with tractors in it. It could be stoplights or cars or whatever. So that's the first step. That's the first authentication. And then the second authentication is going to be your security questions. So it's going to randomly pick 2 of the 4 security questions that you've already established, and you have to provide the correct answers. And then when the release goes out at the end of this month, we're also going to do another authentication, which means you're going to have to, a verification code will be sent to the email address we have on file, and you're going to have to enter that verification code into the screen to reset your password. And that's not in place now, but it will be in about 2 or 3 weeks. So that's how you reset your password. If you're a new user and you click on I'm a new user from the home page, you'll come to this screen and you click on the eGift sign up, in which you can, if you are submitting a grant for an agency that is new or has never submitted a grant before, they're not going to be already listed in our system. If you're submitting a grant for an agency that has submitted for a grant before, then you can select it from this drop-down list because it's already been established. So if that's the case, you would just select it from the drop-down list. If not, you're going to click this checkbox that says click here to create a new agency. So if you do that, well, either option you pick, the very next question is going to be if you already have an account with the Office of EMS. If you have any kind of account with the office already, select yes. If you have submitted a call for presentation, if you register for symposium, if you're a provider, any kind of account that you already have with the office, select yes. If you do not have any account with the office, obviously you select no. So if you select yes, it's just going to prompt you to log in, and then it'll be attached to that user ID, so you will not have multiple user IDs. So this is going to go through the new agency registration. So if this is a brand new agency, ABC Volunteer Fire and Rescue, it's going to ask for your organizational information, the address the agency name, the address, the zip code, all the information, the city, state, zip will be pre-populated based on the zip code. Enter in all these anything with a red asterisk is required field, so everything has to be entered on the screen that has that red asterisk. Make sure your federal ID number is correct. That's very important. So once you do that in your new agency, once you fill that out, that request, and hit and submit it, it will be sent to the office for approval. The office staff reviews your request and approves it. And if it gets approved, you will be notified through email that your new agency has been approved. And then you can go ahead and start your grant from there. If you've selected already an agency that is already in existence, and once you get the required eGIF role, usually the authorized agent role, this screenshot is based on an authorized agent role because it gives you the most functionality. When you log in, you've probably noticed if you've logged into your account, if you're a provider, that the dashboard has changed drastically in the past few months. We've done a lot of upgrades and navigational enhancements to the system. So if you have an eGift role, you're going to see this box at the top of the screen that says grant applications. If you have access to multiple agencies, where the agency name is, it'll be a drop down and you can select which agency you want to view or work with. If you click on the See More button, it'll take you to the eGift dashboard, which is at the bottom. A sample is at the bottom of the screen. This is the screen where you can do everything from the screen. So at the top of this, or the menu at the top, home is going to take you to your dashboard with your provider information, or your main dashboard. Dashboard is going to take you to the eGift dashboard, the screen that we're looking at. Grant management is going to take you. Grant management is going to take you to the screen, a more detailed screen that you see at the bottom of this page, where you can submit invoices and sign MOAs and that sort of thing. Grant documents is simply a list of all documents associated with every grant that you've ever submitted. So if you have a grant from 2014 that you want to go pull up an award letter for, you can do it on that screen. User management is only going to appear for agency super users. That's where an agency super user would go to grant roles for eGift. So if you look down a little bit to the next section of that screen, it says grant cycles. Here's where you can begin working on grants for the current cycle. So in this specific screenshot, it says 2019 December standard grant, and this person happens to have maybe 2 agencies that they have access to. So they would click on the pencil and they can start editing or submitting their grant, which I think Linwood's going to go over in detail the screens to submit a grant in just a moment. And then the grant management section is the section where you would sign there's a link to sign your MOA. There's a link to submit an invoice, to view your award or denial letter. You want to request an extension or modification to your grant. That's kind of they're quick buttons on the right-hand side to perform those functions. And then the very last section would be grant applications waiting for your e-signature. So if you happen to be the authorized agent for a grant and the financial officer, then you're going to have to sign that grant twice. So in this instance, it would show up down there with the agency name and a button that says review grant, and you could click on that button and do the e-signature as the financial officer. So Linwood, I think now is going to go over this detailed screens to submit the grant. And so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Okay. Again, thank you for signing in. And we're gonna when you sign into eGift and you have your login and you select that December 2019 standard grant, the first thing you'll see is that the organization information will be pre-populated. It will have like your EMS agency number. Yes, no, am I EMS agency? It will have all the structure, whether you're governmental, non-governmental. It will have your regional council. It will have a copy of the FIN number. It will have all this information for you that is pre-populated. And there's a place in there that we can go over there. You can select your OMD, things like that. So when you do all of that, most of that should be pre-populated. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to call Luke. We'll be glad to help you with that. There is a thing below there. It's personnel information, and it talks about the certification. So you have whether that they're first responders. First responder is those providers that's holding the certification of first responder. You have EMT, you have EMT enhanced, you have advanced. So EMT, which is emergency medical technician, those providers holding the certification of EMT, including the basic first responder EMT, basic bridge. So all of those are critical as far as you will find out that this information is automatically pre-populated. It comes from the Office of EMS database that we have on the EMS portal. So you can edit this information under the certification by entering your agency information. You will also need to enter your personnel for career and volunteer. The key is these totals have to match. A lot of folks wonder why it doesn't match. It's because what we have on our portal may not match what you have on yours. So you might have had 5 new members come in, you may have 1 left. The critical thing is that you have something in there that will tell us, okay, this is our personnel, this is our certification, these are the career, and these are volunteer. If you look in the eGift, there's a total on certification. You have first responder, okay, I've got 1 first responder, I've got 2 EMTs, I've got 1 paramedic, I've got 3 intermediates, I got 2 and whatever. And then if that's pre-populated and you have this total that comes up. So if there is something discrepancy or something that you're trying to say, well, no, they're not right. Below there is a comment section. You can explain to us why this number doesn't match. But in reality, before you can go on to the next section, the personnel, career volunteer, you have a total. And so they have to match. And they even have a thing in there for drivers only, other, which is your support staff. It may be junior members, people that are not yet certified. So those total numbers will be automatically calculated on the top, and then on the bottom where it says personnel, we want them to match. And so that part is very critical. And again, if you have any questions, we are here to help you. Call activity and demographics. That is, you will see that it has BLS calls, which is your basic life support. That's the total number of calls that's recorded as your basic life support calls. You have ALS calls, which is the total number of calls recorded as advanced life support. You have calls that your agency was unable to respond to. Sometimes people are a little bit confused about that. But basically, this total should include those that were related to mechanical failure, lack of equipment, lack of maybe the members, somebody wasn't showing up. Maybe you had 2 or 3 calls that sometimes it just emergencies happen and they happen all at once. It's kind of feast or famine. And so explain to us, somebody may be saying, I need to replace this ambulance, and then I see that you've got 100 missed calls. Well, is it because that the ambulance was having mechanical failure? Is it? So explain that to us. Why your agency wasn't able to respond to those calls. There's a thing that says calls outside of your primary duty area, and this is the total that should include the calls. You know, we all have a mutual aid agreement, and so sometimes agency A may not be able to respond, and so when agency A can't respond, then their tone will go out and it will go to agency B. And so when you go to agency B, um, you can take in, that's a mutual call. So, okay, we wrote on the call, we had 2 or 3 people here. So that is what that is talking about. We have average call time. You calculate the average call time for the calls and the number of minutes. So in the system here, it may say, okay, well, it may take me 30 minutes. So it may take me 15 minutes to get on the scene. To the hospital, it may take 5 minutes. Some of these agencies have an hour transport. So it's critical to tell us how long it takes you to make a round trip. That will tell the graders, the committee members, a lot about the geography, a lot about the demographics. You need to explain the geography and the population, the other agencies, and the unique challenges, the barriers that you have. We did a tour just very recently, and it was an eye opener to a lot of the committee members because, you know, whether it be city, whether it be rural, whether it be, there's such a variation and such a call difference in these geographic areas. So we have the square miles of service area. That's the total square miles that's covered by your agency on a given basis. Population of the service area, that is the total population of the service area that is covered by your agency. So if it's very rural, it may be 2,000, 3,000. If it's a city, it may be 1,000,000. So the population is, it tells us more about the service area. The total number of the stations that you have, you may only have 1, you may have 2. I know of an agency that has 30 some. So let us know how many agencies you have. Again, we have a comment section. This is very critical. You can use this section to describe, give us the information that the reviewers should know about this information. So that comment section is saving grace. It helps everybody to get going on. Okay. If the number of certified personnel providers does not match Office of EMS record, we again put that comment section in there. Please explain that to us. That is that's something that you're able to tell us there that maybe why it doesn't match, why it's not, but it's what we have on record. So I am going to go on to the vehicle information. The vehicle information, this is a list of vehicles that the Office of EMS currently has on air file for your agency. The program rep, he comes in there and he will inspect an agency, and you may have 1 vehicle, you may have 100 vehicles, but whatever is on air record is what's going to show up pre-populated in eGift. So you can update this list, you can add, you can delete vehicles, you can change the unit numbers, you can do whatever you need to do. You can sort, there's a little red box up there. You can click on that box and you can sort things. This will not update the records on with EMS. It updates it in eGift. It shows the committee members, the grantees, the awardees, all of us. It shows everything, how many vehicles that you have. However, if it doesn't match, you can update and you can, but I would recommend that you contact your program rep. He is the one that will ultimately update it. But for the record, for the grant, for eGift, for this cycle, get it as accurate as you can. and that's okay. On there, it also has, do you have any additional vehicles that's not listed? Maybe you've ordered 2 or 3 and they haven't come in. They're not in the database. They're not showing up as a licensed EMS vehicle. So do you have any on order? Just simply yes or no. Are there other agencies that are using these vehicles? Because a lot of times people will ask for a vehicle or whatever and say, well, you know, such and such agencies, mutual aid, this one uses it, that one uses it. So this is important information for the committee. And then we have, when you get down to it, part of that information, it will ask for the unit number. It will have it listed there. It tells you this is the unit number. Verify. Yes, that's what it is. So have the vehicle identification number. We ask you to verify. Yes, that's what it is. It asks about the chassis, the year. It asks for the make, the model, vehicle type, class permit. It's a transport, it's a non-transport. It's a four-wheel drive, it's a two-wheel drive. What is the mileage that's on this vehicle? We have some vehicles that we know that they don't use a lot of mileage, and yet the thing has went south. So this is important to explain. Again, we have a comment section, vehicle hours. Now, the newer vehicles have this, whether it be running at the hospital while you're transporting a patient, whether it's, so engine hours is important. If you have it, if you don't, then you can explain that, you know, this vehicle does not have that. There was no way for us to get that. So if it's permitted by the Office of EMS, but it's not listed on the vehicle information, you can add it. So that's a good thing about it. And then if you have any questions, again, please call the office. We would be glad to assist you. We'll be glad to go over anything that you need. And so we're going to go on to the financial information. The financial information lists a lot of different things. We have one for the governmental. So if you're a governmental agency, you will see on the very first thing as you come in an organization, it will say governmental. If you're non-governmental, it will say non-governmental. So you will have 2 different sets of financials, one for governmental, one for non-governmental. I think the governmental gets off pretty cool because the non-governmental, we have 4 different sections there that have to be filled out. It's very critical to our committees. It's very critical to you as putting in the thing. So the first thing on that financial information is your assets. On the assets, it includes your cash balance. So that's the amount of cash that you have on hand. That's on your checking account or whatever as the beginning of that financial period. So we have the grant period opening up August 1. So the financial information would be July 1 to June 30th. We're looking for a year of data. And so that information should be there. Real estate, that is the next item. On the real estate, we're asking for the total value of the real estate owned by the agency. It includes your land and your buildings. Properties owned by an agency but not utilized by the organizations of the agency should also be included. So this is part of that packet as far as the real estate. You have investments, which is unrestricted. You have savings accounts that's included in that. You have certificates of deposit. You have stocks, bonds, that kind of thing, which are not designated for specified purposes. So that is investments that's unrestricted. There's a listing for equipment and vehicles. So you take the equipment and vehicles and furnishing. So we're looking for that amount. Restricted funds. That is funds that are designated for a specific purpose. It may be for a new building. It may be for an ambulance. It may be something that you just can't touch. This is restricted funds, and this is going to be utilized for something else, and we can't touch it. So that's the definition of restricted funds. It's designated for a specific purpose. Restricted funds description is you describe that purpose of the restricted funds and the timeline. So if you have $1,000, you have $100,000, or you have $1 million in there, then you're able to tell us what that is for and the purpose of that restricted fund. The second part of the financial information is liabilities. And the liabilities, you have a balance of open accounts. This is the total amount owed by on the equipment and the vehicles, the furnishings. So we have a balance and we have open accounts, and this is how much we owe on that. We have notes and mortgages owed. So if yours is already paid for, then that would be zero. Some people do have an outstanding balance and they have a note and they have mortgages, and so you would put that there. Other indebtedness, which is obligations, that would be debts that's not indicated above. So that wouldn't include the balance of open accounts and then mortgages. That's something else. Again, we have comment sections that we can do that. You have a description of indebtedness. So your obligation, so you can describe this, how much your indebtedness, how much your obligations incurred by your agency. So this is important. We have other fees. Now your other fees is the amount that you receive for EMS fee for services. We've had a lot of confusion on that, of whether I've seen grants that come in and they have an amount that they charge for fee for services. And when you got to the question, do you receive fee for services? And they would say no. So there's a little bit of confusion. So if you receive money, we're asking for the amounts of funds received by your agency for EMS fee for services. If you don't receive any, put zero. Fee for services charged, you can check that box, yes or no. Service fee for call, if applicable. You can indicate, okay, well, BLS calls are what? Say $500, ALS calls maybe $1,000. We're looking for the mean, so the middle row would be $750 per call. So you're not going to be able to just say this is how much, but you can again describe that in the comment section and let us know how much that is. Service fee for calls indicate that the amount that's charged if a fee. Cost recovery, we're asking for a percentage. It says, what is the cost recovery or your rate of return? So you're catching something. So it depends on how much you think it is. I've seen people put 20%, I've seen them put 25%, I've seen them put 10%. Some don't bill at all, so they put zero. So let's go to the receipts and the revenues, and I hope I'm not going too fast. But receipts and revenues, it asks for your local government, the amount received from a local government, be it the county, city, town, etc. That's not included in the 4 for Life. Speaking of 4 for Life, that is in there. We have a 26% return to locality. It's called, I call it 4 for Life funds. I've been here a long time, so as it rises, it's still 4 for Life for the old timer. So we're asking that's the amount of funds received by your agency from the Office of EMS. Sometimes this will go to the city or go to the county, and they may designate a certain portion. I know some counties that do it on a rotation basis. This agency will get it this cycle, this one will get it that cycle, and they plan around that. So that's what we're asking for the 4 for Life. The donations is the amount received by the way of donations, contributions, bequests. Sometimes you will have memorials. People will give you the property, they'll give you the request, and they will, you know, a lot of people have fundraisers. So, you know, you may raise $300 today and you may raise $1,000 tomorrow. So we're talking about donations, how much comes in. I know where I live, I get letters from 2 separate agencies because they're both in the county, and depending on which one is closer than the other. However, they both are polling the county, so it's okay that they're trying to seek donations. Capital expenditures, that is the amount of funds extended. Okay, I've jumped down. Let me jump back up just real quick because I hadn't I want to go to the interest and dividends. That seems to be a confusing thing also. Amount of funds received through the investments. Some people have investments, some people don't. You may get interest, you may get dividends, you may have security things, you may sell them, you may whatever. So interest and dividends are your amount of funds received through investments. Other revenue is the amount of funds received through other sources not listed. So we try to cover this multitude of things. Expenditures, we have operational expenses. So that's the amount of funds spent on operations. It includes vehicle maintenance, operating costs, your gas, your oil, your equipment, your training, insurance, your uniforms, supplies, utilities. That's operational expenses. Now, personnel costs is the amount of funds expended to pay salaries and benefits if applicable. I know that we now have a lot of agencies that have career staff and volunteer. So we're asking for the personnel costs for that agency. Capital expenditures is the amount of funds expended to purchase your vehicles, equipment, buildings, etc. Other expenses would be amount of funds expended by your agency, including funds transferred to investments and depreciation. So there's a multitude of things that go into play here. I know when you're filling this out, I always recommend that you have a vehicle person that will get your vehicles together. You'll have someone that does the financial side. You have someone that does the personal side, so that you're not doing it all. I know one agency, the one guy, he did it all. That was my hats off to him, because that's a hard thing to do. However, it can be done. Again, please call us if you have questions. Non-operational is an amount of funds expended for accounting services, auditing fees, fundraising costs, only if the gross receipts are listed under fundraising. So that's the thing. So the summary of all of that is all the financial information will be automatically calculated by the system, and we will go over that. So again, the governmental has a different thing there, and when we go through that, it's just a matter of hopefully that we have covered the assets, we've covered the liabilities. I think it's on the next slide. Yes, so on this slide here, I have went over it again. It's cash balances, your real estate investments, equipment, vehicles, restricted funds. The liabilities are your balance of your open accounts, your notes, your mortgages owed, indebtedness, your obligations. And then on the receipts and revenues, your local government, return to localities, your donations, EMS fee for services, fundraising, interest, dividends, grants, other revenue, expenditures is operational, personnel, capital, other, non-operational. So your capital expenditures, funding used to buy, maintain, and improve your fixed assets. Finance summary again. There's assets, liabilities, receipts, and expenditures. You have your net worth, your beginning balance, your cash difference, and your ending balance. And that should pretty much cover your financial things. I want to move on to requested items. Now, on the requested items, please note that you have an add item for each item you will be requesting. Luke had already touched on it, that you can ask for more than one item, and that, whether you're asking for one item, whether you're asking for 2 or 3, and we have had multiple calls that came in wondering about the price list and wondering about why they didn't get this, but they had combined an ambulance with the power load system. And Luke touched on that earlier, that if you separate these, then that will eliminate the problem The one thing, there's always an exception to the rule. And I always say this, it's like if you're doing a extrication system, you may have the cutter and the spreader and you may have the whole packet there, and you can separately list that as far as the items go. But if you're only asking for a cutter, then there's no need in putting 25 things on there. So again, it helps the reviewer if the items requested um, are easier for them to understand. So you have like the item type and you have a selection. We've had people say, well, why don't you put each one in a category? If we did that, it would probably take us 10 years to finish everything because they always come up with something brand new. So there is a selection that you can go down. You can do the item type. You can do the item name, the funding level, whether it's 50-50, whether it's hardship, um, whether it's an additional, whether it's a replacement. And this is important because sometimes you may have an ambulance and you're trying to replace this ambulance. So you're letting us know that, okay, this one is going out of service and we're going to add this. We're going to replace it. So if you want an additional one, maybe you only have one and you need the second ambulance, then you would put additional. We're asking for the requested quantity. Are you asking for one AED, two AEDs? How many do you have right now? So we're asking for like items. So if you have 5 Life Pack 15s or whatever, and you're asking for 3 more, is this going to be additional? It's going to be replacing these things because sometimes they go out of date. And so we see that. So how many do you have on hand? How many are you requesting? And then the total. So what is the total price? This will automatically calculate. So if you're asking 50-50 and we have an item that's going to cost, say, $100, then 50-50 would automatically calculate that it's 50 for the agency, it's 50 for the state. And so this is important. Go down through there and select it. Sometimes people will select other, and when it comes out to the reviewers, they don't have a clue. So it's okay. You can call Luke, you can call myself. We are here to help you. We're here to try to guide you along this process. I think it's I was here in the older days when we had to key everything in, and it was kind of difficult. So to me, eGift is probably the best thing since sliced bread. So on your requested items, you have that. You have additional information, describe the timeline and intended outcome of the project. What resources will your agency contribute to ensure a positive outcome? Matching funds, personnel, equipment, etc. What would happen if this were not funded? Would it have a serious effect on the community, on the EMS care, patient care? So we're asking you to tell us this information, verify this so that we will be able to help you. Tell us, describe your project. You have a thing on there for project description, sustainability. So if we're going to fund something, how are we going to keep this funded? We're required to have items for at least 5 years. And so it's very critical to the committee, to the graders, to explain what resources your agency is contributing, be it matching funds, where it's going to come from. Do we have enough personnel? Do we have the proper equipment for this item? And I'm going to go over the summary. RSAF applications require e-signatures from your authorized agent, your financial officer, and the operational medical director. As Tracy Mason has stated, if you are a non-EMS agency, the OMD or the operational medical director is not required. You're still required to have an authorized agent. You're still required to have a financial officer to sign off to let us know that the figures are correct or accurate. Not that we don't have any questions about it, but this is the way it's set up. It's always, I know Luke and I, when we go over paper, we always have another set of eyes. I don't care what I'm doing, I'll put it by Luke. I don't care what he's doing, he puts, so always have another set of eyes. And with that said and done, I'm gonna turn it back to Luke and he will continue with this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Linwood, for a very thorough description of the application and everything that is required to submit for the Rescue Squad Assisted Fund. One quick thing that I did want to note about the application summary section of the eGift application is that if you indicate that you are both a financial officer and agent of an application, as you go through the application summary, there will be a box you can check to say that you are the financial officer, and you will be able to both as the financial officer and authorized agent. Thus, the OMD signature would be all that is required if you are a licensed EMS agency. That would be external. I'm going to talk briefly about the grant review process. Applications will be forwarded to the following after the grant deadline. It goes to your regional EMS council, the OEMS program representatives that verify the equipment awarded by grants review these requests. It's reviewed by OEMS staff who specialize in priority areas such as recruitment and retention, EMS systems, emergency ops, communications. We have EMS advisory boards committees such as the Transportation Committee and Communications Committee that review requests for equipment within that category. And then we have the ability to bring in other parties as deemed appropriate to ensure a effective, efficient, and equitable review process. These reviewers, the initial reviewers, will submit their recommendations and comments to the Office of EMS within 30 days. After that, Linwood and I process those comments and recommendations, and we send them to the Financial Assistance Review Committee, who utilizes the perspectives of all of these different reviewers, as well as the information reported within the grant application to create a final recommendation to the State Health Commissioner for approval. So FARC reviews and reviews recommendations and comments from the other reviewers and makes their final recommendation, which is the score that you guys see is a 1 through 5. Typically there's some decimal points after that, and they make these recommendations within 30 days. FARC conducts an award meeting for announcing the requests that received a viable funding grade. FARC reserves the right to recommend a request to partially funded or place a condition of funding on any award. Within 7 days of the award meeting, a report of the requests that are recommended for funding will be submitted to the Health Commissioner for approval, and then agencies are notified of these decisions via eGift, of the Health Commissioner's decision, that is, through eGift on July 1st and January 1st, respectively. I do want to note that a lot of people will call us up and they will be like, well, where's the award announcement? Because they're expecting it to go through email. We have so many agencies that are awarded, it's hard to contact everybody. So the eGift system just notifies you within your eGift profile. So it makes sure that, for sure it will be there on January 1st or July 1st, whether or not you've been funded. I'm going to briefly talk about the evaluation criteria for RSAF. Reviewers are instructed to make sure that they are evaluating based on the fact that the requested item or project is required for licensure and or certification by the rules and regulations governing EMS. The requested equipment is required for an upgrade from BLS to ALS. OMD identified, class availability, statement of endorsement from local governing body supporting the upgrade. So that's where those additional reviewers' comments really come into play. The current personnel is trained to operate requested items. Essentially, you can pretty much guarantee yourself you're not going to get a very good grade if you ask for something and you don't have any personnel to operate it. It just doesn't work like that. The equipment matches the level of care The vehicle request will be evaluated based on the current vehicle inventory, call volume, vehicle year, mileage, and current number of EMS certified personnel. We have a transportation committee that really kind of grills down and looks at the specifics of your vehicle, including the quotes with the spec sheets that you submit, your call volume, your personnel, your number of missed calls, and the mileage and wear and tear reported on your current fleet. The requesting agency serves more than its own service area. An increasing percent of calls are out of its district. That's something that the committee weighs very heavily. Equipment requests to be shared with other EMS agencies. Again, another thing that is very important, shows collaboration throughout the EMS system. If an agency is requesting a new ambulance as replacement, your agency must state the number of engine hours along with the mileage for the replacement. Program requests are identified in local, regional, or state EMS plans as a priority with impact to the citizens served. So this is a project that goes above and beyond the immediate agency, and as I mentioned in several of these other bullet points, has broad impact throughout the region. The program equipment or equipment requested is compatible with the goals and objectives of your agency, the region, and the Commonwealth. So when FARC submits their recommendations and grades, they submit it in the form of grades, and the grading scale is 1 through 5. So to understand what these grades mean, or grads, I suppose, I did a little typo there. Grade 1 indicates an immediate funding need, and that is that there are no alternative funding sources, or they appear to be unavailable. The system will suffer if the program is postponed. The program request is of greatest impact to the citizens served. 2 would indicate that there's definite funding need, meaning the alternative funding is limited or delayed availability. Programs are of high priority, there's need, and there's a high impact to the citizens. All right, 3 through 5 is where we start, getting into the fact that maybe there's funding available, and that you really didn't demonstrate the need or impact of the program to the citizens. So with a grade 3, the main thing with this is that local funding appears to be available, and the system will benefit from an improved timetable. And that sentence really means that this is something that could be a priority in the future, but right now the project, there are other needs that are more present. Grade 4, the project can be delayed. This is where the local funding is definitely available. We can see it. There's low impact to the citizens, and consideration will be given as need increases. And then a grade 5, you're really going to only see when you have an incomplete application, you did not submit the required documentation, or if there's a conflict, if there is a unallowable cost that you included, or if there's simply no articulated in the need of the project. So there is another score that goes into the final score, which is submitted to the health commissioner, and that is VDH, the VDH score. And this score is a measure to ensure the equity of the grading process, as it takes into consideration many things that an individual reviewer would have extreme difficulty in the timeline that we have. It bases its score off the health professional shortage area. These are terms from HRSA, the Health Resource and Service Administration. Whether there is a shortage of health professionals, if the agency is in an area with a large medically underserved population, the fiscal stress of the municipalities or counties or cities, and the balance of return to localities. So if there's a lot of carryover, or if the reports are indicating a balanced year to year return to locality. You're going to, to calculate your overall score, we have a document on the website called the RSAF scoring criteria document, and it will allow you to, it'll give you links to different websites where you can calculate each of these figures, and it will give you what your score for the cycle would be. Some resources, we've got our webpage. You can contact me by email anytime. You can contact Linwood. Our phone numbers are on the website, so you can contact us through that. And with that said, I'm going to open this up to the question and answer section of this webinar, where I'll be answering questions from you guys. And we have some members of the Financial Assistance Review Committee on that I will be asking these questions to. So just have to unmute them. All right, Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes,
Say
I hear
something.
you. I hear you.
Awesome. I hear you now. I think everybody else does too. All right, I'm going to open up to Bruce now.
I'm right here.
Hey, Bruce. Awesome.
Here and waiting. Okay.
All right, so awesome. So let's see. I'm going to look through our chat box and see what questions we have. In the meantime, if one of you or both of you could answer, one at a time, obviously, what is the most important part of the application to you as you're reviewing for the Rescue Squad Assistance Fund?
All right, this is Kevin. I can start off on that. So first off, I wanted to express the committee's appreciation to all of you that are participating on the webinar for taking your time out to learn more about the program. And I want to thank Luke and Tracy and Linwood for a great presentation today. And as far as what we as a committee think is the most important part of the application is, first off, you need to clearly justify what you're asking for. So don't assume that we know why you need the item that you're asking for. You need to clearly explain it to us. And then also a very important part of your request is the justification financially. So this is a financially needs-based grant, so you need to clearly justify that financial need.
Thank you, Kevin. Bruce, you want to comment?
It's along with that. We just remind everybody all the applications, these things are competitive. We try real hard to look and balance the needs, like Kevin said, with financial need. We look and we review, and what we really try to do is pick the item that's needed the worst, and the agency or the individual applying that has the greatest financial need for that is pretty much the combination of those two elements.
Thank you, Bruce. I have a question here that popped up. I think, I can address, and I think, maybe more than one person may have had this question, but someone asked in the chat box if there will be a award webinar for agencies that were awarded a grant from the spring cycle before December. If you're meaning the last cycle that was awarded, no, we are already well into that grant period. This is something that will be beginning for the first time with this grant cycle starting January 1st. So we will likely have that webinar. What did we say, Linwood? Probably the end of January?
Yeah.
But more information on that will be forthcoming and will be included in the award letters to the agencies that are awarded. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat box, but I do have some that I prepared for Kevin and Bruce, just so that we can, you know, get this stuff out here for the folks that are going to be listening to the recorded webinar. So in the meantime, please submit your comments. I say that there's 15 other people on here, so if you have any questions, if you're wondering how Kevin and Bruce kind of weigh your request in their mind as they're reviewing these, please ask now. This is a great opportunity. But in the meantime, Kevin and Bruce, what are the characteristics of a good or effective application? What makes an application good? What makes one bad?
I'll weigh in on this. It's okay, Kevin. And
Yeah, go right ahead.
For me,
excuse me for a second. We also have J.C. Bowen on the line too, if you want him to weigh on anything, Luke.
Oh, okay. I didn't see his name, but yeah, we have 3 FARC members. Okay, so half the committee is here.
that's good. But for me, and each one of us have to review and judge in our own minds and everything, but the characteristics of good, effective application, it really needs to be complete. We need to be able to see what is needed, what your thoughts are. It should be easy to understand, description of the project, and the reason why the item is needed. Of course, like Kevin said before, good financial report aids in our understanding. And all applications and sections ought to agree with each other. We see some, and I'm sure maybe just typos or just failing to look back and review real well. But I've seen, for example, in there, there'll be a fee for service, and the answer will be no. And then the revenue recovered, you'll have amount recovered right there. That's in total disagreement. Now, there may be a reason for any of these, but just anything that may not appear to be exactly right, describe, explain why 2 items may, seem to be in conflict. But just an easy report that gives us good understanding of what you need is what we need.
Thanks, Bruce. Still waiting for some questions to pop up in the chat bar, but in the meantime, I just wanted to reiterate how important, to Bruce's point, it is to have each other review your grant applications before you submit them. Have folks within your agency review it, and even if need be, because Linwood and I are not part of the review process, but rather we're a part of the office administering the grant program, we don't necessarily grade. So you can contact us at any time and ask questions about, does this sound good to you? Does this sound effective? We have probably the most personal relationship with the reviewers that you could get. So please, contact us with any of your questions. And JC, it appears that you're self-muted. I tried to unmute you, but you're going to have to unmute yourself too.
Oh, I'm here. I was just listening in and observing.
Okay, thanks. Well, now that the 3 of you are here, I'll ask another question while folks are still, coming up with questions. Oh wait, no, we do have a question. Thank you, P. Hoyle. The question is, regional councils are, this isn't a question, this is a statement. Regional councils are willing to review grants prior to submission. Yes, regional councils do help with the writing process, and they provide a lot of technical assistance. A lot of folks, a lot of the staff at the regional councils have been working on RSAF for a very, very long time, and so they know the ins and outs of it, and they can pretty much tell you straight up. And a lot of them will give it to you, flat out, whether or not you've got a good request on your hands, or if you really need to go back to the drawing board. I'm going to ask another question from the list. Does FARC favor one class or type of equipment over others? This is a question that I've received personally from agencies a lot, and any of the three of you can answer.
All right, this is Kevin. I'll jump in on that one. So the short answer is no. If somebody's asking for a stretcher, we're not leaning towards one brand of stretcher over another. And the same thing for an ambulance. We're not weighing in more in support of one vendor over another vendor. We're just recommending funding of a stretcher, for example, or funding of an ambulance. And as far as the type, that's up to the person that's requesting it. But there is an established amount that will be paid, and if it costs more than the established amount, then the agency requesting the grant will just have to pay the additional amount.
Thanks, Kevin. Bruce or JC, do you want to respond to that at all?
I'll jump in on that.
Go ahead, JC.
Basically, your narrative sections, doesn't matter what you're asking for, as long as it's justified in your narrative section. We can't sit back and look and say, well, everybody needs this, nobody needs that. Each agency is unique in their needs. And if you're asking for something, explain why you have it and why you need to replace it or why you need an additional one. There's no set rule as to what you can or can't apply for if it's part of it, if it's within the allowable list. But no, as far as favoring one thing over the other, my favorite thing to see is something that is critical and something that is needed and affects the people with the greatest impact. I mean, basically the way I look at it, there's no, I have no preference over any of the equipment. Just I'd like to fund all of it.
Right.
This is Bruce. My thoughts
that,
go
JC.
right along. Okay.
Oh no, go ahead, Bruce. I was just
Right,
JC.
right along. Sorry about that. Right along, JC. We don't, in my case, and seemingly with all the rest of them, we don't look at one item over the other, but we want to fund something that's absolutely needed to continue or maybe improve care. If somebody needs a stretcher, or they need a defibrillator or whatever, what we want to do is go to provide fundings for, again, that will provide generally accepted level of care. Now, if there's room in the budget, monies and everything like that for something that may be a beneficial addition, we may go there. But the money first, the way I see it, has got to go to something that will provide for, again, the generally accepted level of care when needed.
Thank you, Bruce. I got a question in the chat box. Are requests for programming funds reviewed the same as requests for equipment funds? This is a good question. So basically, what I'm hearing from this question is that our request for funds to initiate or start up a program that serves an EMS purpose, the same as, say, a request for an ambulance. And any of the three of you can answer.
So this is Kevin. So I would say that the equipment funds and the program funds are rated very similar in the fact that we're just looking for a very clearly articulated need in the grant application, and then we weigh very heavily on the input that we get from the Office of EMS Specialist involved in whatever that particular program would be. So I would say it gets equal consideration.
Thanks, Kevin. I have another question here. Is hardship defined by the project need or the financial need, or both?
All right, this is Kevin. I'll answer that one. So this is a financially needs-based grant. So the hardship funding would be based on the financials that are presented and the justification of those financials. So if an agency is asking for a hardship grant, but they have a large amount of money in the bank that's not earmarked for a project, then that would not be good justification for a hardship request. So the simple answer is it's financially needs-based, and that's how we decide whether it's hardship funding or not.
Thanks, Kevin. And just to kind of expand on what you're saying a bit, so the need for the project is what's evaluated when you're deciding whether or not to fund the project, period. And the financial need is used to weigh whether or not you're providing hardship funding or not, correct?
That is a correct statement.
All right. Hopefully that answers that question. I got another question here. Will a re-chassis receive consideration if the ambulance box is in good condition, however the chassis has suffered a catastrophic failure which cannot be repaired? That's a very involved question. Any of the three of you can weigh in that in any way you want. In any order, that is.
JC right here. Is the box a current box meeting all the regulations and safety standards that are set forth of a new ambulance? If not, will the re-chassis include the safety provisions that have been added to the specifications of the new box, the requirements of a new box?
I agree, JC. I would advise an agency asking me that question, directly, that they're really going to have to articulate the ins and outs of this particular re-chassis, because, simply stating that we're going to get a re-chassis, there's a lot of unknowns involved there.
Okay, I see a yes popped up on the screen. Look, we'll weigh the cost out. If you can do a re-chassis and your box does meet current requirements, I don't see any reason to not consider. Kevin, weigh in on this.
So I think you explained that very well. So if the box is going to meet the new standards, then this gives us an opportunity to spread that grant money out to more people, because it's cheaper for us to fund a re-chassis than an entire ambulance. So this is a discussion that our committee had recently, and it's something that we definitely would favorably recommend, with the understanding that the box has to meet the current regulations.
Good. Thank you both. I got another question in the chat box about how is the RSAF scoring tabulated if your jurisdiction doesn't have a primary medical care return for health professional shortage area per the health document provided. Trying to understand that question. Just give me a second. Doesn't have a primary care return for. So are you saying that you don't have a number for the HPSA? If so, okay, correct. If so, that then the other factors are used in calculating it. I'm hearing from our IT staff that it's factored in as a 0. I thought that it averaged the other numbers, but it actually puts it in as a 0. You're welcome. We've run out of questions in the chat box, but I will ask another one of the questions I have from my list. And if you guys have any more, last chance to get your questions in before we close out this webinar. If an agency was not funded last cycle, should they bother applying this cycle? How would they know if their project is a low priority? Kevin, AC, Bruce, any one of you answer?
All right, for the first part of it, definitely put in. I've seen several occasions where an agency failed to receive funds on one cycle, and next cycle they did receive a favorable score and did were granted funding. If the low priority, maybe Luke, you might help on that. But as far as giving up after one, if you didn't get it, don't do that. If it's a good, reasonable request, there's nothing at all wrong with repeating that.
Absolutely. And as far as the second part of that question, I formed these questions on this list based off of things that I've been asked. And, I've told agencies in the past, you can tell what a low priority is on any grant like RSAF that publishes its grant awards. If your grant request doesn't kind of fall within what FARC has been funding, or at least somewhat related, then, I would consider the extent to which it meets the goals and purpose of RSAF. Is it improving EMS service offered in an area? Is it in improving the regional EMS system? And the extent to which it's doing that. That's kind of where it falls within that spectrum is how you can tell whether or not it's going to be a high priority or not. And another way of doing that is communicating directly with your regional council. Still seeing no questions, so I think we've pretty much touched upon everything that we can for this webinar. Kevin, Bruce, JC, did either of you or any of you guys want to weigh in on, make one last final note before we close out?
And there is one, Bruce right here, just one thing I'd like for everybody here, and I've been real impressed since I've been on this committee with the fact that we've got folks from all over the state. We've got different perspectives. People know their own areas and such as that. And it's a real learning experience, and there's a whole lot of work goes into trying to do everything as fair as possible. And I've very much enjoyed working with the other fellows that I've had an opportunity to work with on this committee.
And
Thank you, Bruce.
This is Kevin. So I just want to conclude by again thanking Luke and Tracy and Linwood for putting on this webinar, and just want to encourage you all that are still listening in to encourage others to participate in these webinars. Everybody's doing a huge job trying to get the information out so that we can improve the quality of the applications, and by improving the quality of the applications, then of course you're improving your chances to be funded. So thank all of you for participating today.
I'll go along with what
Thanks,
Bruce and Kevin have said, and thanks to folks there at OMS for putting this together. And if anybody needs help, you guys are a phone call away. Also, your regional councils are just a phone call away. It's always better to ask for help in the front end than ask why after it's all over. So don't be afraid to reach out. There's lots of help out here. We'd like to fund every grant that comes through. So if we had the money, that's exactly what we would do. But anytime you need help, always jump in. It's free. Take advantage of it. And thank you all for putting this webinar together. It's very informative.
Thank you, JC. And just a reminder for everybody as we're closing out here, the application deadline is September 16th, 2019. We will not accept any late applications. So, get to working on that because September is right around the corner. And all too often we see a lot of agencies that wait to the last minute and then they struggle trying to get an OMD signature. So make sure you're contacting your OMDs ahead of time if necessary to get them to sign off on your project, let them know it's coming, and get that information in there as quickly and efficiently as possible. As mentioned earlier by Kevin and Bruce and JC, Linwood and myself, we're always just a phone call away. You can call, email us at any time. We're happy to answer your questions. A copy of this webinar will be available on our website after we're done here today with the slides. There's a bunch of other information you can access there. And just, give us a shout out sometime here soon to help you out with your application. So I appreciate everybody being on today. And with that, I will conclude the RSAF Technical Assistance webinar for fall 2019. Thanks, everybody.